Welcome back. Today, owner and president of Auto SCT Consulting and Training, author of Why Auto Service Departments Fail to Grow. He's been transforming stress into success for decades now. Don Andres, welcome to the Fixed Ops Mastermind.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks so much for the invite. I've been watching the show for quite a while. Love it. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
I appreciate that. I'm grateful that you take the time to watch. Let me give everybody a 2-minute intro to you, and then we'll get straight to the wisdom.
Okay, great. So, like you, been in business a long time. Got started in 1979 and down in Detroit. I was a service advisor. And my first 20 years were in that Detroit market, managing large Ford dealerships. And then in 2000, got invited down to Reichert Automotive, at that time, the number one Ford dealer in the world. And it was a rude awakening for me. I realized very quickly that I didn't know as much as I thought I did, but I've had a lot of fun and success relaunching my consulting company now and going in and helping small to large operations figure out how to be productive and of course have happy employees. That's a big deal.
It sure is. And I'll tell you, as I read through your book, I really felt like a slacker going through, and seeing the or reading the things that you've done. So I'm excited to talk about all this today.
Well, it was fun, yeah, and the book in itself was a fun project to do. But yeah, you get to this point in your career, you feel like you want to write some stuff down, and
Hmm.
so far it's been well received. But thank you.
All right. And so this week, 3 areas we're going to cover are segment 1 is called Practical Steps in Dealership Consulting. Segment 2 is the impact of morning meetings on productivity. And segment 3 is key lessons from your book.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
If everyone's ready, let's get into it. So, segment 1, Practical Steps in Dealership Consulting. Don, what's the first thing you assess when you begin consulting with a new dealership?
Yeah, typically a dealer or a general manager will reach out to me and have an agenda of things that he's noticed that they feel like they might be struggling with. So we're going to meet, we're going to talk about what they perceive to be some issues. And so I'll certainly look at that individually. But what would be a typical morning for me? I probably would get in early and start and watch the service drive itself. I'm looking for customer engagement with service advisors. I'm looking to see what is the manager doing on that morning. Is he jumping in and helping, or what is happening with him? I then typically might follow that repair order then into the shop. How is that work being dispatched? And I probably even have a few conversations with some technicians as well. Once I have a pretty good idea of the flow and areas that may have some concerns, then typically I'm going to grab the service manager. We're going to spend some time together now. We're going to review some repair orders. I'm going to not only look at effective labor rates, is there some discounting going on? Those are obviously important, but I'm actually going to look at the MPI, that multi-point inspection. I'm going to actually evaluate the quality of that multi-point inspection. So how many cautions, how many fails on a maybe 100 ROs or so. And that's very enlightening in many cases, where we start to see that the advisor didn't actually get put in a position to be successful because, frankly, it was kind of all green, even though it had 98,000 miles on it and it was 7 years old. It was just all green. So, those are probably as good a place to start on a first day.
Yeah, excellent. For the multi-point inspection, I was really big on 100% of the cars, 100% of the time. And if that meant that we were redoing a multi-point inspection on a car that was just in 3 days ago, then that's what we did. For a lot of reasons, right?
Sure,
I'm up in New England. There's the roads are not great around here.
sure.
And it doesn't take much for somebody to hit a pothole and cause a bubble in a tire that wasn't there when that car came in 3 days ago, and have that tire blow out when that customer leaves here. And now, we're on the hook for that. And God forbid something bad happens when that tire blows out.
It's great that you have that culture like that, because really that's part of what you have to do is you have to create a culture where they're just doing it because that's what we do, as opposed to what do you mean you in your mind justified not doing it? You know what I mean? When you leave a gray area with a technician, I think they'll rationalize sometimes not doing it. That's a great culture to have.
Yeah, it's and you know, to be honest, you start that culture at the dealership with you can call it a fear tactic, if you will, but there have been some prosecutions of technicians
Oh,
for not doing these type of inspections, and somebody gets hurt, and you know, there in some cases there are some that have actually gone to jail for it. And I don't want to see that. I don't
yeah.
want to see that happen to anybody in this industry. I certainly didn't want to see it happen to any of the technicians under my care.
Well, it's true. So something as innocent as a reprogramming of a recall, right? It's
Mhm.
on. It can be done on a flat. Doesn't have to be on a hoist.
Yeah,
And in your mind, doesn't justify it. In the customer's mind, my car was just in for service, and you didn't see it.
yeah,
I think you're 100% right. That's pretty powerful, and yet it's so important. And by the way, when you get into managing at that level where everybody understands the big picture of why we do the multi-point inspection,
right.
you hear about some stores are going to pay to have it done. To be honest with you, if everybody's understanding that's such a great finder of additional needed
Mhm.
services, uh, then the culture is in place and people are doing it for all the right reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Don, what do you see as the most common issue that you encounter when you go in to consult with a dealership, and how do you approach solving that issue?
Well, there's a couple things. Typically, we are going to see sometimes it just being a little chaotic in that drive. Yeah. We ask a lot of service advisors. If you look at their desktop, they got a lot of windows open on a lot of different products. And so, if there's a lack of preparation, typically we're going to see them moving at a pretty fast pace. Well, what does fast mean? Invariably, you end up sacrificing that time or that engagement with the customer. You're
Hmm.
polite, you're nice, but you're moving through that write up at such a fast pace. Why? Because there's more cars waiting behind. And the end result is that you haven't really connected with it. And we know all the way back, if you're not connecting with them, then customers are just not sure whether those needed
Yeah,
services need to be completed. They value their car, they value the information, but if they don't know you on a personal level, you haven't created that level of relationship, then
right,
in all honesty, that's when we start to get no's strictly as a knee jerk reaction. And we
yeah,
know that because they might call back 2 hours later and say, yeah, you're right. I thought about it. Yeah, go ahead and do it. But in that
right.
moment, they literally said no, and we know that typically is they're just not sure about you, right?
Hmm.
And the new videos have helped. Where now we're having more credibility with the new videos. I like that, but
Yeah,
I still need that advisor, in my opinion, to explain what they're looking at on that multi-point inspection. And I do that because I've connected with them and here's what's going to happen today. So I do see the engagement side of it get missed. And we know that has a rippling effect. We have productivity. We have dispatching systems that will jump out at me. I still see stores I've walked into where the advisor is literally running the RO into the shop to find an available technician, and that's a concern. Right now, I've got a technician with 8 ROs sitting on his box, and now he's deciding which one he wants to work on next.
yep,
Meanwhile, the advisor assumes that car because it was written up this morning is being worked on, and yet it got shoved to the side. So sometimes looseness in the dispatching
yeah,
and putting way too much decision making in the techs. And by the way, they don't necessarily want that either. They get stressed out when they're not sure what they're supposed to be working on next as
right.
well. So we see some of that. And then probably the thing that almost always is seen, and you'll find this interesting, Dave, is the follow up of decline services. So
Mm,
even those monster stores where they're closing at a 40-50% rate
Yep.
of additional needed services, that's still 50-60% that are declining. And so what is the plan for those? Boy, a lot of dealerships live in the moment. The cars, the door opens up, the cars are in. We're going to work through
Yeah.
that day, and we're going to close the door at the end of the day and go, wow, let me go home. And and they get what they get that day, and then they move on. And the reality of it is, there was a lot of people that didn't have time, didn't have money that day,
Yep.
but you put together a plan for declined services, and now you see a dealership really, really rocking it out.
Yeah, and so I'm going to go back to where you started on this with advisors not making that connection with a customer, right? Because this at its core, it's a relationship business, and the customers just happen to bring a car to us to get it fixed, right? It could be anything that they're coming. They could be coming in to get a sandwich. They could be coming in to get an air conditioner replaced or purchase a stove. It doesn't matter. It's a relationship that the advisor needs to establish with that customer for them to feel comfortable. Number one, the advisor to feel comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
the client in presenting items to them, and then the comfortableness of the customer to listen and hear what they're saying and understand what they're saying, to receive that, to receive that information, right? And if that relationship isn't there, it doesn't matter what you say or how well you say it. It's the human nature reaction is to say no, right?
Yeah, I'm just not sure, right? And I laugh. I say this often. Female clients are different than male. We know that, right? A
Yep.
male, if you don't discuss price in the first 30 seconds or 10 seconds of that conversation, the only thing he's thinking about is you're listing out all the concerns, is how much
Right.
is it going to cost, right?
Yep.
Whereas the female, it's a different thing. That they want to understand the safety part of this. The last thing I ever want to do is be disabled on the side of the road, right? That's a
Right.
huge panic to them. So when you get rejections from a female client that says something like, well, let me check with my husband. Let me check with my dad. Let me check with
Hmm.
my boyfriend that I don't have. In other words, what they're really saying is, I'm just not sure. And
Yeah.
so it's a common statement. And so, as an advisor, if you hear an objection from a female, let me just check with my husband, let me check with
Yeah.
my dad, um, know that you haven't connected, that you haven't got them to build enough confidence that what you're saying makes sense and that it truly is something that needs to get accomplished in a vehicle. By the way, once they understand that, because price sometimes is down that list, they're
Yep.
saying, yeah, let's go ahead and get it done. And you haven't told them the price yet
Right. Right.
because they have such trust in you. They're going, no, let's get that done.
Yes.
So it's funny how, over the years, you understand the client's uh, lack of knowledge, right?
Hmm.
They understand
Yeah.
tires and brakes and oil changes. Beyond that, they truly would like to know and understand the car, but at the same time, they don't necessarily know how to, or interested in
Yeah.
learning how to make a watch. They're not
Right.
necessarily having to go that far.
So you talked about follow up at the end of that, and it's so true. So many dealerships are in the moment, and they're just so happy at 5 o'clock to lock that door and go, ah, I survived another day, right?
Yeah.
And they're not concerned. They're not concerned with the people who didn't purchase at something today, and worrying about getting a hold of them. Um, and that comes from typically, like you said, even high performing stores are not great about follow up with declined work, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from advisors or managers, they declined it the first time. What makes you think they're going to want to hear from us a few days later to ask them
That's
again.
true. That's true.
Right. They,
Right.
they,
I love that.
yeah, they
It's
say it all the
wrong on
time.
it's wrong on so many levels.
Yes.
Remember, these people have chosen to come to you. They have so many options in the marketplace,
Yes.
and they chose to come to the dealer. And yet,
Yeah.
you have advisors saying, "Well, they're just going to take that information, and run over to the other local guy, and get the work done cheaper." And you go,
Right.
"Really? I don't think so." They
Yeah.
they've chose to come to you. No, there's a legitimate reason. Sometimes time is it. Sometimes it is budget.
Yeah.
So this active delivery, something you've heard over the years
Yep.
constantly, turns out to be extremely powerful, right? I, there's a lot to do is to get through the day, but don't waste that opportunity to really, really build that relationship at the end of the visit. If you gloss that over, hey, go see the cashier, she'll take care of you. Or if you're doing self-cashiering, here, it looks like you owe, $163 today. And here's our multi-point inspection. Do you have any questions? No, great. Have a nice day. Really? You
Mhm.
know, they, at this point in time, if there were needed services that had to be done,
Yeah.
this is the time to actually organize yourself, have the paperwork all ready to go. And then when you call them and say, hey, the vehicle's all set, see me when you come in. I'll review everything with you. What you're really doing is you're asking them to pause for just a moment and review it. So you review what we got accomplished today, then you immediately will say, here's that multi-point inspection we talked about, and here's the things that you approved. And by the way, as you can see, there's a lot of green. And then here's the 2 or 3 items that you decide to hold off on. Let's go
Yeah.
ahead right now so that you don't have to remember. Let me take the responsibility of remembering, and let's set up a plan to loop you back in and get those done. Why don't I give you a call in about 4 weeks or so, and we'll literally just review this one more time. And if it makes sense to you, and you want to set up a time to come on back in, we can do
Mhm.
it then. So why don't you and I plan on talking in about 4 weeks? How does that work for you? Well,
Yeah.
yeah. In many cases, they're like, "Well, thank you. You'll do that for me. You bet." So suddenly now I'm in charge of their vehicle and that responsibility. And
Right.
so the book kind of talks a little bit about it. It could be as simple as taking the repair order and going into your Google Calendar or Outlook
Mhm.
and typing in that repair order number, because in DMSs these days or in multi-point inspection products, all you need is your repair order number to
Right.
go in. So if you went out 4 weeks on a calendar, plugged in that number, and did nothing else, then
Yep.
4 weeks on that day, you come in that morning, you pull up the 4 or 5 repair order numbers that you happen to, maybe 3, whatever it might have been, and you pull up. Sure enough, you're going to remember the car, you'll remember the MPI, you'll remember
Yep.
the whole conversation. And then sometime
Mhm.
throughout that day, you just simply call them up and say, hey, this is Don. We talked about those items. It's been about 4 weeks. I thought I'd talk
Yep.
about maybe looping you back in and get that done before winter so that you're back in great shape. Remember, we do this today, you're good for 2 years. You do this today, you're good for 3 years, whatever that circumstance might be on those services. And invariably, 30% will say, thanks. I'm glad you reminded me. Yep, let's go
Yep.
ahead and schedule it in. And that's sold work now coming in. That's work that
Right.
doesn't require any authorization, no delays. The tech
Yeah.
who did it 4 weeks ago, if you're really good, you'll remind the tech, hey, that one you did, hey, they're coming back in to get it done. So now they will constantly give you a better MPI
Yes.
because of nothing more than they're being rewarded even 4 weeks later. I mean, you want to
Right.
talk about somebody that lives in the moment. It's a tech that lives in that car is out of his bay. He's moved on to the next car. To have
Right.
sold work come back in, it's pretty powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that process. The first service manager that I worked for as a service advisor, um, taught me that there was no tech right back then. Uh, and he taught me he called it a tickle file, and
Yeah.
it was literally index cards that you wrote the customer's name and the stuff that you needed to remember, and you put it in there for 2 weeks from their visit. Right. And the file was just a constantly rotating 2 weeks. Every day, the cards moved forward every day. Right. And 2 weeks out, You always had somebody that you would just kind of give them a little tickle, just give them a little reminder that you're there, and that they needed something. Um, it, uh, it
I don't think you got much pushback either. People are always
no,
afraid to call. Turns out these people appreciate the fact that they're
yeah.
remembering, you're remembering, so they don't have to.
I'll
Uh,
tell you, Don. One of the things that he taught me was to take something non-car and service visit related and put it on that card and use
oh,
that when you reached out to the customer, right? So
yeah.
if they were dropping their car off and they were on their way to a meeting, or they were picking their car up and going to their kid's baseball game or whatever, you wrote that on there and you went, "Hey, how'd the baseball game go with your son?" And
That's
like
strong.
a lot of times they were like, "What baseball game?" Well, the last time you were on your way to the baseball game with your son. Did they win? Did they lose? Right? That meant so much to
Oh,
people.
it's huge. That is so strong, Dave. You have no
Yeah,
idea how strong that is to be able to do something like that. I'm
yeah,
trying to keep it as simple as possible for an
right,
advisor. We used to make copies of the repair order. Well, how often do you get to a copy machine to be able to do it and all those
right.
things? I actually was causing more work than it needed to be in those early days. I love the index art, and I love the fact that there was soccer balls in the back seat, and
Yeah,
you were
exactly.
connecting with oh, you coach soccer, oh my goodness,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, that's powerful. It really
That's
is.
something I carried. I carried that through for 35 years. I carried that with me, and taught advisors how to make a quick note on top of the repair order when they wrote somebody up about if it was, if they were going into the waiting room, write down blue blue shirt,
Yeah.
blue shirt, red hat, whatever. So you don't go walking into, nothing drives me nuts more than an advisor walking into the waiting room and going, "Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Smith," and and the 300-pound burly guy goes, "I'm John Smith." Oh, yeah. Um, like,
You don't remember me?
yeah, you can't remember the difference between
Oh
Mrs.
Lord.
Smith and John, the 300-pound lumberjack that dropped the car off with you 5 minutes ago?
Good luck with him with closing that deal, right?
Exactly. So Dom, one of the things that I was thinking with follow up is that this is the example I used to give to managers who would say who would say they already said no once, right? So uh, they everybody goes out to dinner at some point in their life, right? And at the
Hmm.
end of dinner, the waiter or waitress always says, "Would you like to see the dessert menu?" Right? Now,
Yeah.
if Dawn goes out to dinner on Tuesday and the waitress says, "Would you like to see the dessert menu?" and he goes, "Oh, no, thanks. I'm stuffed." She goes, "Great." And then you come back in there on Thursday. Is she going, "Oh yeah, Dawn doesn't do dessert. I'm not asking him again." No, she presents the dessert menu again to you,
That's
right?
that's a great analogy. It's a great analogy because she knows that 1 out of 5, 1 out of 4 is going to say, "Sure, I've got a little bit of room for that,"
Yeah,
or maybe the next time in, I'm saving room for that,
right,
right? And
right.
so you start being consistent with things that you want to get the customer up to speed on, and they're
Hmm.
hearing that. There
Yes.
was a great story of a service advisor that was struggling to sell additional needed services, some fluid exchanges that really need to get done at mileage intervals, and he finally was convinced to just ask,
Yeah.
and sure enough, a year later. People were coming in and going, I probably need that service again. I know we did it last year. And he goes, no, you're actually good till next year. No, just go ahead and do it now. Why? Because they liked it, they believed in it,
Yep.
and so it was that easy. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he goes, I would have never guessed. And it's all about educating, informing, getting them up to speed. These people value their car and they value that information. So
Yeah, absolutely. And so you talked about the active delivery also, which is a huge part that gets overlooked too often. Um, and so I always used, um, I always used I called it the read method. It was the relationship enhanced active delivery, right?
Ooh,
And
okay.
so now that assumes that you built the relationship with the customer at the start of this visit, right? You need to have
Yes.
built the relationship to then be able to leverage that relationship at active delivery, right? And
Yeah.
that that relationship enhanced active delivery pulls all those pieces together. It's all those little things that happened in the visit, at the beginning of the visit, the things that you remember, whether it's soccer practice, whether it's a meeting, whatever it is, those things get pulled together in that active delivery. And then any declined items that they do have, when you say to them what you just brought up, like, would it be okay if I reach back out to you in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we'll just review this stuff again? I just want to, I know there was a lot going on today. Make sure that I go over all these things again, and we'll see what see what things you do or do not want to do.
Yes, so that you don't have to remember, let me remember for you.
Yes, exactly.
It's a powerful statement. It really
Yep.
is. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, so that all comes back to that very beginning, doesn't it? This idea
It
of
does.
having enough time in the relationship building part of the write up, something that
Yes.
gets glossed over because of that. So there's a lot that the book talks about, this idea of being prepared so that you've carved out enough time to do it. One of the great things I say in a write up process is you have to say, here's what's going to happen today. And
Yes.
once you say, this is how it's going to play out today. This is what's going to happen with your vehicle today. And then you say, one of the things we'll do is that complimentary multi-point inspection. You'll get the results when you pick it up. If something jumps out at us at all, I'll call you and let you know. Otherwise, you'll get the results when you pick it up, and we'll review that at that time. So they get it. It all makes sense. So now when you're reviewing at the end of the day for them, guess what? They anticipate that. Why? Because you told them, here's what's going to happen today. And there's a lot that in that little statement, by the way, because you do want to talk about the fact that I'll
Yep.
be calling you to let you know, and all that stuff. Is this the best number to reach you at? So that part of the write-up process where you say, here's what's going to happen today, I think
Mhm.
is extremely important.
Yeah, it's pulling the veil back, right? And allowing the customer to understand what's actually going on, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot there. They have no idea. Once their car leaves their view, they have no idea what's going to happen from there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
You're
you're taking
exactly
that
right.
mystery out of it.
Even if it's a waiter, I want to
Yeah.
say, here's what's going to happen today. Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
So I think I think the last driving point in that is
Yeah.
that managers don't always know what to do to create that time. They says, "Don, we're
Yes.
just too busy. We got just too big of a push," and so there is a lot that goes into creating the time necessary to engage with the customer. The book
Hmm.
gets into that kind of stuff. You and I have learned over time, something that wasn't necessarily taught to us either, but because in my day when I got started, it was first come, first serve. There
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
appointments, uh, and I can't believe I lived through that. By the way, um, but hey, wait by your car, buddy. No, don't just stay by your car. Don't come up to the desk. Yeah, those were tragic days. um, but uh, but so there's a lot that goes into creating an environment
Hmm.
where that happens. I in the book I talked about a Lexus store I worked at. We did 200 Lexus a day, and so how do you have the ability to create enough time and still manage through 200 Lexus a day? It can
Yeah.
be done, and once these strategies are put in place, everybody is stress free. We know what's going to happen today. We're just waiting for the customer to arrive. And so we have a highly productive day just from this pre-planning that the book talks a lot about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a perfect segue into our segment two, which is the impact of morning meetings on productivity. This segment is brought to you by Automotive Warranty Network Incorporated, family owned and operated claims management service based out of Denver, Colorado. They currently process more than 100 million in warranty per month. how do you structure an effective morning meeting for a fixed ops team?
Yeah, boy, one thing you can't do is just say we're going to start them, right? Good luck with that, right? You got advisors are in the middle of a hectic morning, technicians are in the middle of it, and now you want to do what? You want to stop and talk for 10 minutes, or you before the day starts, wait, you want me to come in early? So if you're not selling the value of why this is so important to allow us then to have this calm, highly productive day, if you're not really making sure that morning meeting has real teeth and real value. Now you're just demanding it, and every excuse that they have to not attend quickly comes to the surface, right?
Yep.
And in their mind, they justify it. No, I think that a store that doesn't gather up in the morning before the doors open and talk about here's what's going to happen today, here's what we got going on among the
Mhm.
buyer staff, I think leaves way too much gray.
Yeah.
And remember, employees fill in the blanks when they're just not sure, and there's some gray area. They can't help that, they'll fill in the blanks.
Yep.
So having a manager have a quick meeting with them, but that mid morning where we want to actually create small team type set, and there's different ways of dispatching. So there are groups and lateral supports and simple
Mhm.
groups and centralized dispatch. But I think we want to have this pause and a really highly productive 10-minute meeting, I think is incredibly important.
Don, what specific productivity improvements have you seen result from implementing regular morning meetings?
I think the most important part of the morning meeting, frankly, is that the technician isn't surprised. I think it's important that we are not interrupting the technician, especially if it's in the middle of diagnosing something with
Mhm.
waiters. Right? Waiters are those things that are necessary. They're part of our who we are, but in all honesty, they're in the middle of diagnosing something. You walk up and say, "Hey, can you stop what you're doing?" and bang out this quick waiter, this recall or whatever. And not that they don't want the work, but the reality of it is they've lost their train of thought, and now they get that
Mhm.
done and they come back and they have to start over again. Now, if you have a morning meeting where you actually say, "Hey, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to stop you. We're gonna get this waiter taken care of and then get back on it." They're fine with that. They plan that psychologically. They're good with that. They'll take all the money. But I
Mhm.
think the morning meetings are so powerful when you can lay out the work that's coming in and say, here's how the day is going to play out for you individually. And if I'm not surprising a technician, typically they'll be very productive.
Yeah, I always did my morning meetings before we actually opened the doors to the customers.
Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
took that 15 minutes before we opened the doors, um, and went through number one. They knew the things that we were going to go through, right? But and I called it a morning huddle.
Yep.
That's what I called my morning meetings, right? It was
Yep.
mandatory attendance, right? Everybody had to be there. Advisors, parts, everybody was there because we all have a part in making this ship run effectively. And we just go through number one, the appointments for the day, how many appointments
Yep.
there were, what time certain things were coming in. If there were check engine lights coming in that had to go to my diagnostic team, then they knew that at 9:30 we had a check engine light. At 11 o'clock there was
So,
a check
yeah.
engine light, right? So
Yeah.
they knew they had to be ready for that, right? They couldn't be in the middle of something else that they couldn't pull away from to work on this check engine light. Um, it brought out other things, if parts had something that was on back order, right? Rather than finding that out when the tech goes to bring the job in 6 hours later, you were finding that out in the morning where parts was saying, hey, so two items were on back order, or one item didn't get shipped like it was supposed to, so we don't have it. Or there were also times, Don, when parts would, you'd go through the techs would go through the work that they still have,
Yeah.
and tech A would say, well, I'm just waiting for my part to come in today for that F-350, and parts would go, we didn't order anything for that job you're working on.
It's amazing how you learn so much in those
Yes.
morning huddles. You really do. I mean, how much time you got left in this? I'll be done with it in about an hour. Oh,
Yep.
great. You know what I mean? Well, then I've got this and this lined up for you right after. Everybody wins when they're not surprised, when assumptions aren't made. Right? I told
Right.
you, employees will fill in the blanks when they're
They
not
sure will.
sure. They'll, and just like customers will do that too. When you say my car, should be ready this afternoon, in your mind that's 5 o'clock, in a customer's mind that's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Woo!
Absolutely.
So they'll fill in the blank if you make these ambiguous statements. So I love that. I had one of my stores, simple groups. So we had a writer and 4 technicians, and they were their own little company. And so mid morning, we had 10-minute meetings, and the writer would come in with their route sheet with their appointments that hadn't come in yet. And so they would literally march through with the 4 techs. What are they working on? What's
Mhm.
next? What's the ETA on that? And in the beginning, it was like pulling teeth. Why would you interrupt me in the middle? I remember you really had to push that in the beginning. Guys, trust me, you're going to value this, but you got
Yes.
to commit to it.
Right.
And sure enough, 6 months into that deal, if God forbid we skipped a daily meeting, I go, whoa, 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 where's my meeting? There was such value in
Yep.
that conversation. So I agree with you. You can't say do it just for the sake of doing it, but if it's highly productive and
Right.
everybody is gaining knowledge in that, people show up. People show up, and they'll call you out when it's not happening, right?
They sure
So,
will. They sure. I can tell you that there were times when I'd be in the office doing something or talking to an advisor, and somebody would come and tap me on the shoulder and go, "They're ready." And you would turn around and everybody was standing there
oh,
for in the bay for the morning meeting that you hadn't showed up to yet.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. That's
So
that's strong. Yeah, that's when you get to
yeah.
that level, everybody's valued it. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about anybody who's struggling to get attendance or engagement in their morning meetings, right? The morning meeting shouldn't just be the service manager or service director yapping the whole time, right? There should be engagement. There should be back and forth conversation there. So what are some strategies to help them through
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, the cardinal sin. This is not the time to talk about things gone wrong yesterday, right?
Yes.
Those are different meetings. Those are typically one-on-one meetings, and that is a cardinal sin, is to all of a sudden bring up our shortcomings from yesterday, or hey, I'm noticing we're parking the cars in the wrong spot. No, this is very focused strictly on productivity. Here's what's coming in today. Here's what I expect. Uh, and then exactly what you said. Hey, there's some parts that are missing, or how much time do you have left on this job before you're done? Good, solid,
Hmm.
productive information and nothing else.
Right.
Maybe, hey, don't forget about the luncheon today. We're out here barbecuing. Fine, you want to mention something
Sure.
positive like that? That's a home run. But that's it. I think you'll agree. This is a production meeting, and people will value it if it stays on task. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And too often in automotive, right? It's to lean to the negative, right? Let's talk about what went wrong yesterday, right? So you're gonna have times when somebody's gonna say, "Well, you said we had 2 check engine lights coming in yesterday, but they didn't come in." Oh, you're right.
Mm,
They didn't, and we don't know
yeah.
what happened with those customers. We've reached out to them to get them rescheduled, but that's yesterday. That's yesterday, and we can't change
Yeah.
that.
Now, how you manage the guy that blows it off, the guy that comes
Yeah.
late, things of that nature, those are done one on one. And typically, you have a little fun with it. Invariably, he ends up with some issues that day where communication get missed, something went wrong with parts, all those types of things.
Yep.
I would never waste that opportunity to go, if you were at the morning
You
meeting,
would have heard it.
you know, you know what I mean? This is why we value blank. And so, those are one-on-ones that you
Yeah.
want to deal with and you want to talk about. I guess you're not there yet. I need you to clear your thinking just a little bit more. The reason you don't see value is you're actually not understanding how important it is to share and to be up to speed on everything. So we got to get you there. And those are one-on-one conversations that can be had, especially if the group is valuing them.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. And I mean, most times those stragglers are gonna come around. They're gonna see the
Yeah.
benefit. They're gonna see the benefit that everybody else is getting, and they're gonna want to be a part of that. And if they don't, you probably have another issue there, Don. Right? A
Yeah,
bigger
right.
issue.
That's just one of one of a few conversations you're probably having with that individual, right?
Exactly.
uh, yeah, yeah.
All right. So now let's get into the book.
Oh, good.
Segment 3 is key lessons from your book. I really enjoyed reading this. I said at the top of the show that it made me feel like a slacker reading this thing. That's not to say I want to go back into stores and run them again to try and do it like you did. I do not want to do that. But what
I might struggle as well.
what inspired you to want to write this book?
Yeah, I think being a service advisor and really growing up in the 80s, where I'm writing service on that first come first served basis, the job paid well enough that you showed up at work every day.
Mhm.
But boy, if you opened that door up, we opened at 7. If you opened that door up at 6:58, you got abuse of a lot of guys. They had 2 more minutes of bliss before the chaos was going
Yeah.
to start, right? And so I think probably when I got to Reichert, and here they were selling way more cars they could possibly service,
Mhm.
and that push was happening every day. And I was smart enough to listen to an old guy. I say that with all due respect to him, but he had been doing it. He was running a dealership in 1969 with 65 technicians in Chicago. So trust me, he had understood what it took to get rid of that
Yeah.
chaos and stress and things of that nature. And I was just smart enough to listen to him. But it really was about that. The book was about, it turns out I was trying to help service advisors know that, hey, you can manage through that by a little level of preparation and understanding what you want to get accomplished with each customer. That was where I started with the book. Turned out very quickly that I really had focused more on, hey, leadership.
Yeah.
It really is you that is actually creating the chaos and creating the stress by thinking it's okay to just open the doors and let the day come to you.
Yeah.
So by the time I was done with the book, it became, hey, service manager, this book is really for you. Hey, general manager, dealer, if you're afraid to go back into service, so you don't want to be exposed for not having a good understanding of what's really going on, this book probably is a good read for you, because it's the fact that you think it's okay to put your employees into that position
Mhm.
of ultimately being stressed and chaotic. So in the end, I'm really glad I wrote the book for that right there. This idea of teaching service managers that it might be you. It might be you that's creating this.
Yeah, and that's a great reason to write it. It really is a simple business, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of complicated numbers and things that go on behind the scenes, but actually getting a service department to run smoothly is a fairly simple process.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about this often. We promote service managers typically out of a shop,
Yep.
right? I mean, they were a great technician and they've earned that opportunity to manage the service department. They're a great service writer and they've earned that opportunity to manage the service
Yeah.
department. But typically they're good in one of those two areas. And invariably they focus on that. If you're a technician, you find that service manager tends to be in the shop a lot. He's moving that work through the shop.
Hmm.
He's handling problem vehicles. He's got great culture in the shop with the technicians, but doesn't spend a lot of time up front with the advisors. Doesn't necessarily spend a
Yep.
lot of time watching their engagement. The reverse is that the advisor might be a rock solid superstar in closing deals and engagement. And meanwhile, the shop is chaotic. It's overfilled with work, and they didn't have any good system or process to move through it. And they got stressful techs, right? Stressed out techs. Yep. So in essence, really what the book is trying to do is saying, hey, you may do this really well, but here's what may be causing some of your other issues. And of course, really the book starts with what? The phone call. If you value the phone call, that customer innocently reaching out to set an appointment, whether it's maintenance or a concern with the vehicle, how much information do you value that? Mm-hmm. And then preparing really sets the tone for a highly productive day or a stressful day.
Absolutely. So, Don, without giving away too much, what's one key insight from your book that you believe every fixed ops manager needs to know?
First of all, it's so important that you, as the leader, have a complete understanding of what you're trying to accomplish that day. What do we really want at the end of the day is yeses. If we just change oil all day long, we're not going to make much net profit. We're not going to. If we're just diagnosing the problem the customer came in with, diagnosis can move fast or they can get deep and difficult. And so if we're just relying on that and then closing doors at the end of the day, you're never going to grow or really creating a net profit, which is really the secret sauce. Here's what a service manager is judged on is not only his gross production, but really his net profit, right? So we need yeses. If there's one thing that you want a service manager, a service director, a fixed ops director to understand is he getting the yeses on a high level? And then is he following up to get more yeses from customers? Because they just don't know about cars and they rely heavily on you to say, here's some things we got to get accomplished besides the oil change, and then have a plan to do that. So, I learn every day. I learned on this podcast from you a couple of pretty good little techniques. But the service manager, service director that has been doing it a long time, feels like he's done learning, is the beginning of the end in that regard, or accepting a high-performing writer and then right next to him in the same service drive, somebody with a third of that production less. And you go, really? If this lead advisor has proved that customers will say yes, and then you're allowing a mediocre or a poor performing advisor and justifying your mind that they just don't have the talent, when the other guy's proven it can be done, these are leadership things that you really, truly want to work on. And that might mean learning more.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? That high performing advisor is not just getting lucky and getting the customers every day that say yes. Right?
No, you're exactly right. And they've proven every day that it's that client base will say yes.
Yeah. And as the leader, it's your responsibility, not just your job. It's your responsibility to develop that team to be the absolute best performing team that they can be.
Yes. When you have all 4 writers, all 6 writers, all hitting big numbers, and on a consistent basis, they're loving it. They're coming every day. And by the way, that just means that your technicians, by the way, are all the way in too. Because why do technicians leave shops sometimes? It's that lack of productivity, that's lack of closing deals, and they get lured away by money. Right. You have a shop that's hitting on every cylinder when it comes to advisor production. They're putting MPIs up there. These guys are closing deals. They're following up on decline. That tech is going to go, why would I go someplace else and hope to have it as good as I have it here? No, I'm in. I'm good. In fact, I'm not even demanding the high rate that is out there in the industry right now. I'm actually good with my rate. It's a fair rate, and I've got so many hours of additional sold work, that gravy work that I can turn my brain off and just knock it out and go home with a great paycheck. No, you have a great service department when you have a very focused service advisor staff that's getting yeses.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's you and I had talked offline about the catch 22 of a technician saying I'm not going to do a multi-point because the advisors don't sell anything, and the advisors say I don't sell anything because they don't do any multi-points, right? but but but
It's true.
but when they're both working well together, when the techs are getting the work done and the advisors are doing their job and selling the work, those two things come together, and it's a beautiful thing to watch.
It's strong. And now you have a service manager out there figuring out how to do, do I place the trash bins here to make it more productive? I mean, he's working on these little
Right.
things now because the machine is just going cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Yep.
And so he's now got his sights on clever marketing. He's got his sights on all these different things. Because why? Because the machine is going. And that's when it's fun. That's when everybody's excited to come in every day, and they love doing what they do for a living. Yeah.
Absolutely. Don, last question. How has writing and publishing your book influenced your consulting approach?
It's really opened a lot of doors because, again, I'm trying to get into general managers and owners' hands, these real leaders in the industry, to realize that there is money getting left on the table. It's been an interesting year.
Mm.
Variable has been challenged a little bit this year, so service departments got busier.
Yep.
And on the surface, you had general managers looking at record months in gross and things that nature, and feeling pretty good about that. But unfortunately, if it was a chaotic shop and now you add volume, it got even more chaotic.
Yeah.
And so sometimes even turnovers start to play into that deal. So I think the book has allowed groups. I've had groups buying large amounts of the book and passing them out in some of these publicly traded companies to their management staff to say, hey guys, I think we're leaving money on the table
Mm.
from something as innocent as following up and decline services, as innocent as just not preparing for the arrival of the customer. So I had time to talk to them. So the book has accomplished that for me. So in essence, that's a positive, that people are now starting to think that there might be more opportunity.
Excellent. Don, this has been a very enjoyable conversation, and I look forward to. My mind is going on other things that we can talk about and have you back on. Any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate it. It's fun to talk to somebody that's been in the industry, that is dealt with these struggles, and it all makes sense in that regard. This has been fun. It really has. I appreciate the invite and look forward to maybe us having some more fun and more conversations as well. But keep up the great work on what you're doing. I know that technicians are such a big following for you,
Yeah.
and that's what we need more of. So thank you for what you do, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk some more. But I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Don. And to everybody else, we'll see you next week.